Hello, I'm Professor Rad, and today we're going to talk about number lines. So let's start out by defining what a number line is. So a number line is something that you can use to visualize signed numbers. When you draw a number line, we want to make sure that the space between each number is the same. So here are a couple of examples. This first example that I have here is what you'll typically see given as an example of a number line. It's got 0 in the middle, and then as you move to the right, it's counting all the positive numbers. And as you move to the left, you're counting all the negative numbers. So this is a pretty standard way of drawing a number line. The second example is how they're more typically going to be drawn when you're working through a problem. So notice on this one, there is a 0, but it's not directly in the middle of the number line like it was on this first one. And it's labeled a little bit differently. So on this first number line, we labeled every single tick mark with a whole number, probably because we would be graphing numbers that were within 5 units of 0. But on this other number line, we've labeled every other tick mark with 20. So it's counting by 20s, and these unlabeled values would be half of that. So that would be 10, then we'd have 20 and 30. Going to the left, this would be where negative 10 is, negative 20, negative 30, negative 40, negative 50, negative 60, negative 70. So you might see a number line like this if your data is not perfectly centered around 0, or if you have larger numbers that are wider spaced apart. So let's do a couple of examples of graphing integers on number lines and how we know whether we should be doing something like -5 to 5 or if we should be spacing them out a little bit more. So here are the two examples that we're going to do. So for this first one, I'm going to switch and draw my number line in black, and then we'll graph the points in red. So the first thing that I do when I look to create my number line is I look to see what the biggest negative number is and what the biggest positive number is. So for example, if I look for the biggest number that's positive, there's a 6, and the biggest number that's negative is this -4. So that means when I draw my number line, it could be kind of like that one that went -5 to 5. So my numbers are still somewhat pretty close to each other. What I have to make sure is that I get down at least to -4 here and at least a +6 here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot for 6 spaces to the right of 0 and 6 spaces to the left of 0. And I'll put 0 in the middle. Now, just to make it more legible, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a tick mark for each number, but I'm only going to label the evens just so it's easier to write out. So we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I have room to go to 7. What's important is I make sure that I make it up to at least the biggest number on both the positive and negative ends. And I'm trying to make sure that each of these is as equally spaced as I can get it. Then going to the left, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then a -7. So that's how I'm going to start by drawing my number line. Next, to graph the set of numbers, what we're going to do is we're going to put a dot on the number line at each of those numbers. So I'm going to go down to -4, which I have labeled here, and I'm going to put a dot right here on the line. Now, I usually try to make my dots a little bit bigger, within reason, just so that they're visible and they don't blend in completely with the line. Next, we're going to go to 6. So that's right here. We'll put a dot at 0. So here's 0. And then we'll put a dot at 1. So 1 isn't labeled, but 1 was this line right in between 0 and 2. So I'll put a dot here. Now, if you want to go further and label the dots when you graph them, you can, but you don't need to. right, let's take a look at part B, drawing that number line. So I'm going to start out very similarly by just making the line portion. And this time I need to make sure that I go to, the biggest negative is this negative 62, and the biggest positive is 29. So I have to make sure I go at least to negative 62 and at least up to 29. What I think I'm probably going to do, if I can, is I might try to count by fives, so that, yeah, so I'll probably put like a tick mark at each 5, but maybe label each 10. That might work. And I have more negative because 62 is bigger than 29, so I'm going to need more room for negative numbers than I'm going to need for positive numbers. So when I think about where to put 0, I'm going to make sure it's probably about twice as far, if not actually a little bit further, for the negatives. Okay, so let's put 0 here. And let's count accordingly. So here we have 5. This will be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So I'm okay because I'm past where I need it to be. And then I got to try and get at least to 62. I hope I can make it. So here we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, and negative 65. Okay, so we made it. And I'm going to make those numbers that I've labeled, have those lines just stand out a little bit better. Again, just so it's easier for me to read here. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and label the numbers that they want us to label, or to graph, sorry. So we're going to graph negative 40, which is one of the numbers that matches with my tick mark. So I'm going to put negative 40 here. The next one they'd like us to graph is at 15. So I was counting by 5, so this was 5, 10, 15. So 15 is halfway between 10 and 20. Very good. Now we have negative 62. So as I go out to the left, 62 is bigger than 60, so it's going to be further to the left than negative 60, since the numbers are getting bigger to the left when we have negatives. So this would be negative 60, this is negative 65. So negative 62 is going to be a little bit closer to negative 60, but not by a whole lot. So I'm going to approximate where it would be located. So sometimes when you're plotting the points, you have to do a little approximation as to where they go. The key is to make sure you get them in between the right 2 tick marks and closer to the right number. Kind of think of it a little bit like rounding. So like 62 is a little bit closer to 60. It's only 2 away from 60 than it is from 65. It's 3 away from 65. Now let's plot 29. So here's 20 and here's 30, and in between them is 25. So 29 is going to be just before 30. So it's going to be in between the 25 and 30, really close to that 30 line. And there you go. So here are 4 examples that you can try to graph on your own. And these are all integers, so they're positive or negative whole numbers. In our next video, we're going to graph decimal numbers on a number line. So looking forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, have a wonderful day.